Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Have History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time I covered the fight around Devil's Den, Little Round Top, the Wheatfield, and the Peach Orchard. Now I'll take the Battle of Gettysburg north to Cemetery Hill. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. At about 7:30 p.m. on July 2nd, after the Confederate right made their major attacks against the Round Tops, Devil's Den, and the Wheatfield, a major action occurred at the hinge of the Union Army. At the bend in the fishhook formation was Cemetery Hill. That hill was on the back side of Culp's Hill. The 12th Corps, which occupied Culp's Hill, had been sent further south to help with the Union left at the Wheatfield, leaving just a few troops to guard the important right flank. The attacks on Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill would occur at roughly the same time. Many of the Union troops stationed at Cemetery Hill were in Oliver Otis Howard's 11th Corps. His men had been soundly defeated and bloodied just 2 months earlier at Chancellorsville, and just the day before on July 1st. Rows of blue troops packed in along the Brickyard Lane and the Taneytown Road. At 4 p.m. the Confederate artillery bombarded the position, making easy targets of the compacted regiments. Union artillery finally picked up the range on the Southern cannons and drove them off, but not after they caused a great deal of damage. General Adelbert Ames noticed that there was a gap in his line between the 75th Ohio and the 54th New York, so he moved the 17th Connecticut into that spot, but that opened up another gap between the 25th Ohio and the 75th Ohio. Many of the soldiers spread out to cover that position, but it was a loose formation of troops. Jubal Early's division halted just southeast of the town, with Harry Hayes's Louisiana Brigade and Isaac Avery's North Carolinians poised to assault Cemetery Hill. Robert Rhodes's division was in Gettysburg proper and was ordered to deploy and attack Cemetery Hill from the northwest. At 8 p.m., Early's two brigades stepped off into the fields approaching the hill. A member of the 57th North Carolina remembered, the line advanced in beautiful order, and as it pointed to the southwest, there was a glint all along the line of bayonets that was very striking and marked how beautifully they were aligned. Basically, without a fight, the 41st New York and the 33rd Massachusetts occupying Culp's Meadow pulled back as the two Confederate brigades crossed the field. They would extend the Union battle line further to the south. Hayes and Avery swung into a low-lying area where the bullets and artillery fire flew over their heads and they were out of range, but as they marched on, the battle line came into full view of the Yankees, and the Federal artillery and the infantry began throwing projectiles into their ranks. One Union soldier described it in great detail. Still on they came, moving steadily to the assault. Soon the infantry opened fire, but they never faltered. They moved forward as steadily, amid this hail of shot and shell and minie-ball, as though they were on parade, far removed from danger. Union commanders in this sector were cognizant that the men under them had received a thrashing the day before, and some regiments could barely field 100 effectives. As the Confederates closed in, the intensity of the rifle and artillery fire increased. A wounded private, watching from the upper floor of a church, described the horrid scene. Heads, arms, and legs flying amidst the dust and smoke, it reminded me much of a wagon laid of pumpkins, drawn up a hill and the end gate coming out, and the pumpkins rolling and bounding down the hill. Avery's brigade took the brunt of the fire. Hayes explained that reason as the darkness and smoke obscured his movements. Despite the lead and iron smashing into their ranks, the two brigades slammed into the Union line. The enemy did not want to move. With bayonets and club guns, we drove them back, one soldier wrote. The Louisianians had found the thinly guarded gap in the battle line and exploited it, busting through and sending many enemy regiments back in the process. A sergeant in the 25th Ohio recalled that the Confederates put their big feet on the stone wall and went over like deer, over the heads of the whole regiment, the grade being steep and the wall no more than 20 inches high. The Union line was wavering and took an even bigger hit when Avery's men made contact with the blue line. The bloodied and demoralized 54th New York and 68th New York broke first, reportedly without firing a shot. On the Union right, portions of the 41st New York made for the rear, but the majority of the unit and the 33rd Massachusetts held firm. As the North Carolinians approached, the men of the 33rd were ordered to fix bayonets in preparation for the approaching 57th North Carolina. To the Union right, 6 artillery pieces opened up a destructive canister fire that nearly destroyed the 57th. It wouldn't re-enter the fight. The pressure administered by the Southern troops was significant and broke the ranks of many of the regiments, and the fighting got even more intense as soldiers shot blindly in the darkness, using the muzzle flashes from the previous volley to know the location of the enemy. Many soldiers resolved to fight hand to hand. Artillerists used their implements to fight back the Confederates. One of Hayes's men threw himself in front of a cannon muzzle, exclaiming, "I take command of this gun." A German artilleryman yelled, "Du sollst sie haben," meaning "you shall have it," and pulled the lanyard, blowing apart the man from Louisiana and turning his body into a red mist. The 75th Ohio and 17th Connecticut stood their ground, while the Confederates rushed in all around them. Rhodes' division moved out of the town and toward Cemetery Hill. All the while, Avery and Hayes's men fought desperately to hold the ground they had just captured. A lull passed over the hill, and an eerie silence crept through the ranks. Neither Union nor Confederate could see the enemy. It was pitch black. Each side took stock of their ranks and listened, the Confederates hoping to hear reinforcements arriving. They did hear the shuffling of feet, thinking it may be Rhodes' division or Gordon's brigade coming up from the reserve. They waited. Then a volley tore into their ranks. Hayes wasn't convinced that it wasn't friendly fire. Another volley brought down more men, and still Hayes wouldn't let his men respond. Finally, a third volley signaled to Hayes that it was the enemy in their front, and a quick firefight ensued. Rhodes's men never made it to Cemetery Hill. They decided they could be of no help in the attack and turned back. The 14th Indiana, 7th West Virginia, and 4th Ohio, moving into position, were the sounds that Hayes and Avery's men heard. They made a counterattack against the Southerners and drove them from the hill. One of the casualties was Colonel Avery, who rode a conspicuous white horse. He and his horse were both shot, the animal pinning him on the ground. There he pulled out a pencil and a piece of paper and jotted down his last words, "Major, tell my father I died with my face to the enemy." After a horribly bloody struggle in the darkness, Union soldiers still held Cemetery Hill, and the Confederates limped back to the town. To the west of Cemetery Hill, fighting was also occurring on Culp's Hill. Edward Allegheny Johnson and his division from Ewell's Corps were attempting to gain the high ground. Both the engagements on Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill were done in the waning hours and into the night of July 2nd.